Wow. That's no good. There we go. Woo. It's a good way to start this thing out. That is Kevin MacLeod rocking the song Vicious, which is the theme song to my Planning Period podcast. And Kevin, I'm gonna roll you out of here. Nice slow fade. How's it going, Ramona? Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. All right, and that's my intro music. So we're gonna go ahead and flow right into the conversation. And thank you, Peggy. I appreciate that. It's a good song. I like it. I like to rock out to it. I pretty much do that little dance move, which is the only dance move I have. But I do that every time I'm editing my podcast and have to play that song. So, yeah, I'm a weirdo is the moral of the beginning of this introduction. So, hey guys, how's everybody doing? This is MADPD. This is being recorded on May 6th. 2018 as part of MADPD, which is Make a Difference PD. And I'm really excited to be here and to get to talk to you guys a little bit about the building morale as an instructional coach. But before we get to that, for anybody that doesn't know me, we'll do an introduction. I am Brad Shreffler. I am the digital instructional coach and also the curriculum resource teacher at a very large high school in Central Florida. And actually this weekend, I kind of made it official online that I am also changing schools next year, and I'll be at a middle school. And I'll be at a large middle school launching their one-to-one program as a digital coach. I've been a coach for the last 3 years. This is my 3rd year as a coach, my 9th year teaching, and I'll be going into my 4th year in the coaching role, which I'm excited about. I'm also the host of the Planning Period podcast, which is a podcast that is centered around conversations between teachers, me and one other teacher each week, talking about issues in education and the things that are going on, which you can check out on my website at bradshreffler.com. If you're interested in today's presentation, if you'd like to have the presentation in front of you while you go, you can find that presentation at bradshreffler.com/morale, and that'll take you straight to the Google Slides presentation, so you can look at the slides as we go through. And yeah, so get some chat going on. I put some effort into my presentation here, guys, so you can see the chat as we talk. I thought that was kind of a neat little touch. And yeah, so it's kind of cool. I'm having a good time. I don't know if you guys have checked out any other MADPD sessions going on, but there are some going out throughout the rest of the day as well. All right, so we're going to roll right into my conversation here so we can get through that and then go into questions. And I wanted to start with kind of the problem of what I'm trying to address here. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the problem is that teaching is a really hard job. And we know that. Of course, that's not a surprise to anybody. Teaching is a tremendously difficult job. And morale, in my experience, is at an all-time low. I've not seen morale this low for teachers in my time. Or my dad was a teacher all through my childhood, and he doesn't remember any time that morale was this low. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of the ways I thought was good to illustrate this is I did a Google search for teacher memes, and these are some of the ones that showed up. You know, you look at who says teaching is stressful. Well, you know, I'm 39 and I feel great. I think we can all attest to that kind of rundown feeling, right? And you see these kinds of memes like the one on the top right here all the time about, you know, when someone asks me how the school year is going so far, and the best you can hope for is you're alive. You know, you just ask people around campus how they're doing. How's your day going? And they just say, you know, it's tough, right? And we all know the issues with teacher pay and overwork and things like that. So it's a job that is wearing people down pretty heavily. And it's really important that we do the best we can to raise that morale. And I believe that as an instructional coach, you're in a unique position to help raise the morale of your staff. Some of the real important effects that matter the most about low morale. Number one is limited innovation. As a digital coach, I want to make sure my teachers are willing to try new things, go out and do something risky or try something that they've never done before. And when your morale is low, it makes it really hard to be willing to try something like that, because you're not really willing to try something new if you're just trying to get through. If you feel like you're treading water and just trying to stay afloat, you're not going to try something new and interesting. You also have reduced empathy. I find that teachers that are the most stressed out have the hardest time connecting with their students. They just have a really hard time recognizing the struggles that their students are going through. Increased stress is awful on any teacher with low morale. You reduce attendance. That increased stress and the low morale just makes you not want to be there, so the teachers don't show up to school. You have an unwillingness to try new things, kind of goes back to the limited innovation, but they're also just not willing to try new things that are being presented to them. You give them a PD on a new idea or something interesting, and they say, meh, I don't really feel like trying that. And of course, teacher burnout is a huge problem. Teachers getting burnt out. We all know the stat that teachers, 50% of teachers quit in the first 5 years, right? We all know that stat. We know that happens. And one of the big contributors overall is that morale problem. If you're leaving work upset every day, if you don't love your job, if you're just feeling worn down and beat up, you're not going to keep coming back. At some point, you're going to say enough is enough. And so we have to combat those things. We have to combat the low morale to help fix some of these issues. Excuse me. Sorry, getting over a little sinus infection here, so I got an occasional cough. I apologize. Some of the things I like to tackle as an instructional coach that I think we have the ability to tackle in our position is these four big things. So the number one is teachers have low morale because of a lack of recognition. I think we often as teachers feel like nobody notices the work we do, that maybe the administration isn't good about telling us that we're doing a good job. The observation systems add to that problem because they rarely do a good job of highlighting what we're good at and instead focus on what we need to improve on. And it's something really important that we make sure we point out to teachers how they're doing a good job and the things they're doing well. Teacher isolation is another huge problem. I feel like it's really easy for teachers to go inside the walls of their classroom, inside their four walls, and just say, done. They don't have to worry about what's going on outside of them. They don't have to connect with other teachers all the time. They can really just worry about their four walls, which is good in some sense, but it's also bad because at the same time, only focusing on those four walls makes it really hard to have someone to talk to at the end of the day. Teaching is such a unique profession because we deal with all of our time. Our closest coworkers, our closest people we work with every day are children. Right? You can't unleash your frustrations on a group of 8-year-olds or 12-year-olds or 15-year-olds because they're children. But that's who you work with every single day. They're your closest peers sometimes. So it's important that we find ways to get outside of that isolation. We know that teachers have excessive duties and expectations. They just don't have enough time to get everything done. And often we deal with this us versus them mentality, where teachers feel like administration has no idea what really happens in a classroom. That idea of a disconnect between teachers and administrators builds this us versus them. And we got to be really careful about that. And yes, I agree with you guys both, Peggy and Ramona. Ramona, the things that go above and beyond our regular duties are insane, right? Those, and again, hit on that empathy issue. If you have strong empathy, you start to feel for all these kids that you're having to provide breakfast and clothing and everything else for. So they kind of compound as well. One of the things I want to touch on is why is it the job, or why should it be the job, in my opinion, of a coach, an instructional coach, to work on this? And I find that as an instructional coach, you are in a middle ground of sorts. In a lot of schools, an instructional coach is treated like an administrator. They're often in administrative meetings. They're given administrative duties outside of what a normal teacher would be given. They're often given things that a normal teacher, quote unquote, wouldn't get. And so they kind of get treated like an administrator. But they're not, because in most cases, an instructional coach is still an instructional role. They're still given the same pay scale and same rating and ranking as a regular teacher. But at the same time, they're not a regular teacher. They don't have necessarily the 7 classes of kids or 6 classes of kids. They don't necessarily get a normal planning period. They're not tied to only a 25-minute lunch. We can go to the bathroom whenever we want. But we are a teacher as a coach, but we also get this sort of inside information that an administrator would have. And so it puts us in a unique middle ground to be able to help deal with some of these morale issues. It puts us in a position where we can have conversations with teachers that an administrator might not feel comfortable having because of their raised position, but that we have the information that a classroom teacher may not have. And so I think it's great for the instructional coach to consider that and be able to use those things to their advantage. So, things to try. So I want to give, my focus today is going to be on some very specific things you can do as an instructional coach that will actually help with your school morale, with your staff morale at your school. And I have done all of these myself, and I know that they actually work, and they're going to be things you can try out and might work well for you. And so I've got about 5 different ways that you might be able to, 5 different ideas you can try. Yes, Ramona, going to the bathroom whenever you want is a big deal. That's a real big deal. People ask me a lot, what do I feel like I've lost as an instructional coach if I ever went back to the classroom? And I've always said my ability to control my bladder to a 52-minute cycle. That is definitely something I don't have anymore. So the first one I wanted to start out with is the easiest one. These are staff shout outs. These are super easy to do. We found this template at our school. The media specialist and I found this template, and it's literally just this little picture. You can put 2 on a page and print them out, cut them in half, and then what we have is a big stack of them that sit in our mailroom. And we encourage all of our teachers at any time, if a fellow teacher did something awesome, to go down when they're during their planning period and they're checking their mailbox or signing in the morning or whatever, to fill one of these staff shout outs out. All you got to do is put the name of who you're sending it to, put on the narrative why you're saying they're awesome, and then slip it in their mailbox. You can make it anonymous if you want. You can put your name on it and say who it's from if you want. It's up to you, or it's up to the person filling it out. But they're a really simple and easy way to give teachers that recognition that they deserve. So putting a stack of these in your mailbox. And then there's a couple steps as a coach you need to do. 1, do them yourself. Make it a goal to fill out 5 or 10 a week. It's super simple to just say, hey, you did a great job. Just because maybe you saw them smile to a kid in the courtyard. Maybe you were in their room and they did a great lesson. Maybe you pulled the data report and saw that their pass rates on some standardized test was great. Whatever the reason may be, throw it in there. Maybe they're a coach and they did something, their sport team did really well, or whatever. There's a lot of great things you can shout a teacher out for. And the smaller the shout out, the better in my experience. So shouting them out for doing something phenomenal that everybody already saw, that's great. If the principal told everybody that, oh, such and such is teacher of the year, that doesn't get a staff shout out. This is for the small stuff, because really that's the stuff that gets us through the day, is being proud of the small stuff you've done. So these are really simple, and the more of them you fill out, the better off you are. So the only thing you really have to do is print them out and make sure they're still in place. I would also send an email out to your staff or a notice out to your staff to let them all know, hey, this is what they are, this is where you can find them, and this is how you use them. Simple, easy. Also encourage your administrators to do them. Encourage your APs and principals to fill them out as well. Let's see, I'm reading the comments here. Private, and I love that it's private because they know it's sincere and not just PR. No, I totally agree. I think that's one of the biggest things, is that you're just slipping it in their mailbox. And so the next morning or whenever they go in their planning period and they're feeling run down, this is what they see. Like, talk about a pick-me-up, right? And you're right. Many teachers, just like students, don't want to be called out in public for the things they're doing. So another one I've been using a lot of, and I really like, is handwritten coaching notes. So when I go into a teacher's classroom to do an observation or peer observation or coaching observations, they don't usually count towards their observations in terms of their scoring typically, but I do like to give them feedback and comments on what I saw. And one of the things I started doing this year is, instead of doing an email or a form or some sort of automated process, or even using our coaching log that will automatically notify them in our observation system, I started writing them handwritten notes. As a digital coach, people don't expect a handwritten note from me. How often do we write handwritten notes at all anymore, to be honest? And so what I found really powerful about this is that, number one, they're handwritten and they're personally addressed to the person that's there. I use a small legal pad is what I carry around with me when I go to do coaching observations, just like the little quarter size one. And I use that just to be able to write my notes on. I always start them off with a thank you. And they always will say, thank you for letting me visit your room today. I really loved what I saw. Even if I don't think it was 100% the best thing I've ever seen, I'm always going to say thank you. And even though they didn't actually tell me I could come in the room, I just popped in, I still say thank you because it's their space and I've stepped into it and I want to acknowledge that because that shows them that I appreciate them and respect them. I include what I think they did really well is always my first part. Then I might give them some questions I'm thinking about. Hey, I noticed you did this. I'm wondering if maybe you could have done something else. And then you have all those notes and you write them down and you send them in. And then what I typically do is I fill it out as you see in this example. I will take a picture of it with my phone so that I have it for my records. And then I fold it in half and I set it on their desk on my way out of the room. That way they have it and they know it's there. They can go read it when they have a chance. And they've got this note to show that I thought they did something really awesome that day. I will also say including a follow-up is really valuable. With these, I've had way higher follow-up than I did in emails and things like that. I used to always include in emails, like, if you'd like to discuss this more, use my appointment calendar to book me and I'll be glad to come talk to you. Almost never did anybody do it. But when I started putting that link on these handwritten notes, I had lots of people start actually using that and saying, hey, I'd love for you to come by and talk to me again. And so it's been more powerful in terms of the feedback I've gotten as well. 8th period, this is one of my favorite projects. I love this one that I've started this year. So what you do is you basically take your entire staff list and divide it into random groups. One of the problems I find is that there's a lot of clickiness in schools. Certain departments know each other really well. People in a given hall might know each other really well, but we don't always venture outside of our known groups. So what I did was I took our entire staff list and I put it in a grouping function. So there's lots of grouping programs out there. We use them in our classes, right? So I used it to group up my staff randomly. Then about once a month, I would send an email to the people on one of those groups. I'd say, okay, group 1 is in September. And we're going to say on a Wednesday after school, I'm going to go over to Ale House or wherever it may be. And if you'd like to join me, feel free. I'd love for you guys to join me, to the people on this group. And I always specify, I explain exactly what it is. I say, like, I feel like there's a morale problem. I feel like people are sad and upset and stressed, and this is a great way for us all to unwind. This is not a school-sponsored event. Administration is not present. This is just for teachers to sit down and have a good time, and it is 100% optional, but I'd love for you guys to be there. And this has been a really powerful tool for me. It's gotten people that didn't know each other to introduce themselves. We have teachers at our school that have been there for 10, 15 years each and don't know each other. Have never really talked. And they've seen each other in passing, but they don't know anything about each other. And it's been a great way for me to build relationships with my staff as well, so that when I do a coaching observation, they know me a little bit better. First Fridays is kind of a twist on this. This is a really good one where you take a first Friday of every month, for example, and you plan a food event for the staff. Maybe it's a pancake breakfast, maybe it's a barbecue lunch, whatever. The key detail here is that whoever's running the event is actually cooking, because that work effort, that putting the effort, not just buying a breakfast, a catered breakfast or whatever and laying it out, but actually cooking the food for the staff shows the love you have, right? We've got a great way, and I'm sorry, Nate, this is like my last food one. It's not food after this, I promise. But this is a great way to be able to show your appreciation through acts of kindness, right? You've got that act of kindness of actually cooking food. And then the other part of this is making sure that they stay and eat, right? Encouraging them, okay, come grab the food, but then stay here and eat it with your peers and sit down and talk. If you want to talk about work, talk about work. If you want to talk about your life, talk about your life. It's really, really powerful. It's a great way. And then what I've done in the past is you'll rotate through which part of the team will plan that event. So maybe it's the principal one day, the assistant principals another month, then the deans, then the resource teachers, whatever. Different people will plan and cook those meals each month so that there's different people sponsoring and supporting it. Really, really powerful tool. And then my last one is an AMA. This one's a little different. Here's the way this works. The AMA stands for Ask Me Anything. It's an internet thing. If you go on Reddit, they do them on there typically, but it stands for Ask Me Anything. And this one's a little harder to pull off because you have to have an administration that's really on board with this and really willing to be open with their staff. But you convince your principal or maybe one of the assistant principals to make themselves available all day in your office. You don't want to do this in their office. That's their space. You need to have a neutral, safe space for this to work, because if you do it in their office, teachers won't feel comfortable with it. Do it in your office, so it's a neutral location. They make themselves available all day, and teachers will come down during their planning period, during lunch or whatever, if they'd like, and they'll come ask the administrator something they've really wanted to ask. One of the key details here is that there is specifically designed that your questions are not met with consequences. The idea is to get your teachers to ask the questions they really want to know, but don't really feel comfortable asking. You're intentionally building this out as a safe space where they can ask a question that they've been wanting to ask, but are maybe afraid to do it. And then the administrator will answer it to the best and most honest way they can. Obviously, everyone's going to know that there's times where they may ask something the administrator can't answer for confidentiality reasons or whatever, but it would be a great way to get real, honest questions from teachers and real, honest answers from your administration. It works if you can get the administration on board with it. I would suggest doing some of those other things first, because you need to build a culture where people are comfortable with the administration in order for this to work. So I wouldn't do this one first. I would wait. Once you feel like you've made some headway and people are feeling more comfortable, that morale's improving, this is a great one to take it to that next level. And those are my suggestions, guys. I did a second search because I thought, what would it be like if we only focused on the positive? It's really interesting to think about what would the positive look like if we focused on that. And so I had a couple more memes that I thought would show you there. But I thought the top right one is probably my favorite. The influence of a good teacher can never be erased. And I think that's awesome. All right, guys, that will lead us into the questions portion. And I see Ramona has a question. It says, is admin always open to this? No, they're really not always open to this. It really is dependent upon your administration for the AMA. You really have to get people on board with being open and honest. And not every administrator is going to feel good about that. It takes time, and you really need to explain to them why you think it's a good idea, why you want them to try this, and how you think it will go. And that's not easy to do. So it won't always work. But if you can get it to work, it's really powerful, I believe. Do you guys have any more questions? Also, welcome, Travis. Thanks for popping into my chat and making fun of me. I appreciate that. Dable, by the way, everyone, is my brother. So that's why he wants to be able to be here to make fun of me. So appreciate that. Are there any other questions for anybody that's here? Anybody have any questions about what, building morale? Let's see, since I retired, I've organized a retiree brunch every year on the first day of school to get together and share memories. Everyone loves it. That's a good idea. I like that one, a retiree brunch. That's pretty cool. Has it ever gone really bad? I have not had an AMA go really bad. I've not had those ones go too terribly. There's been times where the questions were a little more intense than the administrator wanted to deal with. But I also think typically when that has happened, it's from that teacher, that teacher that is always kind of outspoken and honest anyways. So I don't think I would say it's ever gone really badly. I think for the most part, they've been well received. The ones that go badly in my mind are the ones where nobody feels comfortable coming down. And that to me says a lot more about the administrator than it necessarily does the AMA process itself. So the types of questions asked, they'll range. A lot of times there are questions about the decisions that the administrators have made. Why did you put this teacher in this spot? Why did you, why was I given this observation score? Things like that. Sometimes they're really specific questions. Sometimes they'll just be, it just kind of depends. Sometimes they're, what is the goal? What do you want to see accomplished? If you do them at the beginning of the year, you get more of those kinds of questions, trying to get to know, especially if it's a new administrator or a new teacher, they'll try to get to know them a little bit more. But more often than not, it's questions about the decisions that were made that the teachers don't have all the background information for. And again, it's kind of like letting the teachers get that information that I feel like a coach already has. Right. So the coach already has that middle ground information. They have that administrative information that a teacher doesn't necessarily have. And this gives a chance for all teachers to get that same information. And that's kind of what makes it powerful in my eyes. So thank you for the question, Sarah. I appreciate it. Wow. I actually ran all the way. I didn't say. It kind of depends. I will typically do them when I feel like they're appropriate. I don't really have a magic number for that one. I would say that if I really wanted to pull it off, I would say one per administrator. So one for the principal and one per assistant principal would be ideal, because everybody's going to have questions of different people. If you do it with the principal, you might want to try to convince them to do it more than once, maybe do it 2 or 3 times. You can also modify this and make them only available at lunch so it doesn't last as long. It can be really hard for the administrator to take off an entire day. They have a lot of other stuff they need to do typically, and so it can be really hard for them to block out an entire day and sit down in an office. So maybe you do it just during lunch. Maybe you do it just for an hour after school. Instead of like a PD session. I've also seen them done as what they would call like a fireside chat, where you would get maybe 2 or 3 teachers to or you would ask teachers to give the questions in advance and then have it as like a faculty meeting where maybe you're sort of interviewing all the administrators at once. So it's kind of a modified version of that, where teachers submit questions to you in advance, and then you ask the questions of the administrators in an open forum where the teachers are all invited to join in as well. So that's another way you can do it. Do I have any more questions? It's kind of cool. I can like look up at the chat or over at my questions. Oh wait, other way. I forgot I've got the camera inverted. Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. Thank you guys for joining me. I really appreciate it. It is 6:26, so it's going up till 6:30, which is when we're supposed to close this thing out. I really appreciate you guys coming and watching this. If you're watching the recording of this, if you're catching this later, I think it's you know, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. In fact, I will go ahead and put this up on the screen as well. My contact information is on the screen if you'd like to reach out to me. If you have any other additional questions, Twitter, Instagram, I have an email address on there for you as well, or just the feedback form. And Peggy, I see your comment here. Building relationships are really important for these things to be successful. I 100% agree. If you don't have relationships with your staff, if you don't know your staff, then you're not going to be able to make these things work. They're not going to feel comfortable with you. You know, if you can't use every single teacher's name when you see them in the hall, that's a problem. That's issue number 1 you need to address. And, you know, in my school, for example, we have over 120 teachers. That's not easy to know everyone's names. It takes time to get to know their names, but you need to do these kinds of things to make that possible. And if you don't have that relationship, none of these things are going to work. That's step number 1. And I agree 100%. Well, guys, I really appreciate it. If you have any other questions, throw them in the chat. I'll hang out for a couple more minutes here. But thank you for coming in and listening and watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you found some useful information in there. If you did, feel free to share out this link. This link will take you to the recorded version now. So if you want to, or once I close this out, so share out the link on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, wherever you want to share it. Tag me in any of those kinds of posts. I'd appreciate it. Share it out. Let people know if you thought it was useful. If you share it out with your staff, feel free to do that as well. And I really appreciate you guys. Also, check out my podcast, the Planning Period Podcast. You can find it on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. It is the Planning Period Podcast weekly show for about an hour. Actually, just had my anniversary last week, so it's been around for a full year. There's a full year's worth of episodes. And smash that like button. Thanks, Trav. Appreciate that. You know, that's great. My brother spends way more time on the internets and YouTube than I do. So he's got the slang down. He's got the stuff down and ready to go. Guys, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I really appreciate everything you've done and being involved. And if you're a coach, I really, really, really appreciate you. It is not an easy job. I know it's not an easy job. And I think it's great that you are doing the job and are putting it out there. And if you ever have questions or comments, please feel free to message me or hit me up on Twitter or Instagram, and keep doing the work you're doing. All right, guys, have a great day.